and our members will have an opportunity to debate and vote on the adoption of the report. Following the report, we'll begin, as we always do, our Friday forum, which will be on healthcare reform, right at 12:15. Our guest next Friday will be Senator Ben Westland and Senator Alan Bates. Now, 2 days before the vote, you will have ample time to talk to the research committee about their findings and recommendations. So next Wednesday evening, beginning at 5:15 at City Club, that's Wednesday the 14th, we will meet for a town hall discussion. The space is limited, so please RSVP to Kim McSchool at City Club if you plan to come. And those of you who are here today as guests but not members, I'd like to invite you to join City Club and urge you to do it today and to come next week and participate in the debate and in the vote on the City Club report. Just a few more announcements. Next Tuesday, the 13th, City Club will continue our program called Spotlight Theater Series with the Portland Center Stage's production of The Pillowman. Pillowman opened on Broadway in August or April of '05. It was controversial. It gained a lot of attention, and it'll be a play that I think you'll really enjoy. For details about the play, the cost, where to go, and all of that, take a look at the bulletin, the City Club website, which is pdxcityclub.org, or contact Portland Center Stage. And finally, for those of you who've been to City Club Commons in the last month, you know that we have a very exciting art project. It's called the Zimbabwe Artist Project. Dick Adams will be coming to City Club on Thursday the 22nd to talk about the project. So please feel free to come. It's at 5 p.m. No RSVP is required. We have a number of new members, actually 3 today, that I'd like to introduce. Ask each of you to stand and be welcome to City Club. So hold your applause till they've all stood, please. Our members are Malik Hall, Katie Shriver, and Jessica Courier. The last 2 people are from Oregon Community Foundation. Please join me in thanking them for joining and welcome them. During the last quarter, we at City Club and our radio and television audiences have benefited from the support of our corporate sponsors who share the belief that civic engagement is an essential part of life in Portland. Today marks the final week for our sponsors. We are grateful to Girding Edlund, LLC, and McEwen Gisvold, LLP, for helping to make our Friday forums possible. Please join me in thanking them for their terrific contribution to City Club. Our program today is entitled, What's Going On at the Portland Public Schools? Our guests are Superintendent Vicki Phillips with our moderator, Dr. Peter Cookson. Dr. Phillips has a huge job, as you know, and has proven to be a dynamic leader at a time when Portland really needed a dynamic leader. She has so many great successes, too many to name here today, but I'd like to point out that this year, for the first time in recent memory, we have a no-cut budget. And she has faced the achievement gap straight on. She makes some very tough decisions that necessarily generate feelings and controversy, and there are a number of them today that she will be talking about and that you'll be able to ask questions about: the core curriculum plan, school closures, K-8 mergers, and much more. We have a wonderful opportunity today to hear from Dr. Vicki Phillips. Dr. Cookson is Dean of the Graduate School of Education and Counseling at Lewis and Clark College. He's also a member of the Portland Schools Foundation. So this is how we'll proceed. Dr. Phillips will give some brief opening remarks. Peter Cookson will then ask her a number of questions. And then after that, after our board host, Brian Campbell, poses his question, it will be your turn. City Club members are invited to question the speaker, and we'll start that in about a half an hour. So, Dr. Phillips.
Thank you very much. I'm going to make my opening remarks very brief because I know we want to get to an array of issues and questions, and since I don't know entirely what those are, I don't want to preempt any of those, but just two things. First, I wanted to acknowledge some incredible people also that are in this room that certainly make a difference in my life in the districts every day. You've heard me say many times since I came here that one of the things that I valued and that brought me here was having a visionary creative board. So I wanted you to know that in the room today is Bobby Regan, who's one of our co-chairs of the board, David Wind, who sits currently on the board, Doug Morgan, board member, and our board members who couldn't be here wanted to extend their apologies, particularly our other co-chair, Dan Ryan, who's on his way to the Roosevelt game. How cool is it that our Rough Riders are in the semifinals of basketball? The second thing I wanted to do was just say a huge thank you to you. The fact that we have, for the first time since 1994, have a stable, relatively no-cuts budget is due to this, in the largest part, to this community, for your generosity in the recent local option, for your support of the GAP bond as the legislature went into special session last time, and for your tireless advocacy and support of our schools. And I say a relatively no-cuts budget because it is true that for a few schools, because of enrollment declines, there may be a shift in staffing. But overall, this is the first stable budget, as I said, since 1994, and something to be incredibly proud of, something where we can start to rebuild the tremendous support system that Portland has known in the past in terms of adding enrichment and curriculum and other things back to our schools. Still not there yet, but certainly beginning to re-engage in that process, and that is, as I said, largely due to such an incredible community. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to assume that anything else I would need to say is going to get covered in the topics, and if not, reserve the right for the last 3 minutes on the agenda maybe to hit a couple of other things that we might not cover. So Peter.
Well, so Vicki, well, I'm happy to be here. It's a privilege to be here. And I want to thank Vicki and Susan and all for making this happen, so particularly Vicki. So I have a couple questions, and they're questions that have arisen magically. So question number one. Many Portlanders are concerned about high school reform, particularly those schools that are underperforming. I know that you have begun a systematic examination of how high schools can be improved in Portland. I'm thinking of several high schools, including Jefferson. What specific plans do you have in the next several years to raise the level of our underperforming high schools?
So I want to do a couple of things. One is sort of talk about the challenge we face, and also share with you sort of my excitement, actually, about where we can go with high schools, because the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see that be a tremendous focus in the district. And I think part of the reason that I'm excited has to do with 2 or 3 things that give us a foothold that some other places might not have had as they've sought to sort of redesign and push the level of performance at high school higher. One of those is the fact that Portland already has a fairly rich portfolio and array of schools. We have some amazing comprehensive high schools that, where performance is incredibly high. We have schools in which there are comprehensive with a small school model inside, such as Franklin with its World Language Institute this year. We have a number of small schools that have emerged as part of our efforts to increase performance, and those are campuses with campus principals and small school leaders, and those exist at Roosevelt, at Jefferson, at Madison, and at Marshall. And we have an incredible set of community-based organizations, some of which I see in this room, that have done a great deal to help us prevent the higher levels of dropout that Portland was experiencing a few years ago, and who have brought lots of kids back into and allowed them not only to get their diplomas or their GEDs, but to matriculate successfully to post-secondary ed. So the fact that we already have a great foundation to build on, we acknowledge we can be more strategic and intentional sometimes about how those new programs emerge and how we support them, but it gives us a great place to work from. A year ago, our board adopted higher graduation requirements, actually ahead of those that the state have just adopted. So our class of 2009 takes more math and more science, and the class of 2010 11 will actually take additional world language requirements. And that's important to us because of the kids who actually graduate high school, 60% of them currently graduate without the credits they need in order to go on to post-secondary and to meet the Oregon State University requirements. Of the ones who do go to college, sometimes fewer than 30 to 60% of those actually complete college in 5 to 6 years, whether that's an associate's degree or a 4-year degree. And many of them do not attain the additional credentials that we would want them to have, whether they go to college or not, to be successful in a livable wage job in this community. And while we have increased performance, particularly in mathematics and English language arts, we still fall too far short. More kids need to meet standards in both of those areas, as well as in science and writing. And one of the challenges we have right now is the fact that at the incremental steps in which we're making progress, it would take far too long for the majority of our kids to meet the requirements that we need them to have. So we need to step up our work in high schools, and we need to do that in several ways. So you will see us over the next few years strengthening that tremendous portfolio that we already have and continuing to work with our community-based organizations and our internal district resources around our kids that are struggling most and dropping out. We'll have a conversation in a moment, I'm sure, about the curriculum in the district and strengthening the rigor and the base of that curriculum for all kids while still allowing schools to be innovative and creative in that work. You will see us really put more of a support system around our students who are struggling. Some of those students need far more time in school, far more time and opportunities in the summer. They need far more opportunities to be mentored and supported. And many of those kids actually need to leave middle school far more successful. So this is not just a high school problem. This is a problem where we also need to increase the work and the support at middle level. And wrapped around all of that, I think you're going to see us, as we deal with our facilities problems, get very innovative and creative about what we call school and what learning really looks like for kids who need to participate in a far more global 21st century society. So we are incredibly excited about all that. And lastly, incredibly excited about the workforce opportunities in this community that our kids can matriculate into, and working with our employers across construction, manufacturing, health care, creative jobs and opportunities, so that kids know what those are, what it takes to engage in them, and can have multiple pathways to be successful, ensuring that all kids meet the graduation requirements, but that they might do so in a variety of ways. So imagine a high school system in a few years where some kids complete high school in 3 years, some in 4 or 5. Some kids spend their junior and senior year far more outside the school than they do inside, in apprenticeships and on-the-job learning that meets our standards, or maybe taking early college dual credit. We do all of those things to some degree, but what we want to do is make them more systematically available to all kids across the district and open up a much wider array of options for our kids, so that their base graduation needs are met, but so that their interest areas are also tapped in stronger ways.
Well, thank you for that comprehensive answer. I think that answers just about every question I had.
That's good. That means we can stop now, right?
That's great. That's great. All right. This is an important issue that people are asking a lot of questions about in Portland now, and I know you're aware of it, so I'll just read it to you. As part of your effort to close the achievement gap, you and your colleagues at Portland Public School have proposed a comprehensive curriculum reform, not without controversy. What is the rationale behind the changes you are proposing, and how do you respond to the anxiety among some that these changes will reduce creativity and may discourage teachers from actively engaging in improving teaching and learning?
Sure. The first thing I will say is that I think there's a great deal of conversation yet to be had about where we're going in core curriculum, and a great deal of sort of misinformation and great suggestions that are out there to still occur. So the one thing I would encourage people to remember is that this is a process, and the process is by no way through, and we need people to stay in the process and keep raising the issues and asking the good questions that people are asking. And I guess I would say first beyond that our goal is not just closing the achievement gap. That is an incredibly important thing for Portland to do, and it is a high priority for us. But our goal overall is to have all kids meet proficient standards and benchmarks, those that our teachers in our state have defined, and meet those graduation requirements and be successful from one level to the other. And that's all kids without exception. And then it is also to allow students who need more challenge to be able to take up more challenge, so that we want to be a district that brings all kids to proficiency and increasingly offers opportunities to be challenged more directly, if you'd like to, through IB, AP, or other kinds of programs. The base thing we want to accomplish with the core curriculum, and actually it's a core curriculum framework. What's important to know is what it's not as well as what it is. It's not going to provide day-to-day lessons plans. It's not a scripted day-by-day program for teachers. It's a framework that actually allows teachers to continue their creativity and flexibility, but with enough elements in it to ensure that we're getting equitable outcomes for our students. Because right now, even if we look at something as direct as an algebra program, which we know a lot about what the benchmarks and the standards are for algebra, it's still uneven across schools. And for lots of years, our teachers in our schools have had to scrounge for curriculum materials in some schools and been without adequate novel sets and other kinds of things that are important. So our goal in this is 4 pieces. 1, to be very clear about the standards and benchmarks that we want all kids to be able to meet and allow some kids to go beyond those benchmarks. 2, to put high quality, up-to-date materials in teachers' hands and in students' hands, and in those schools in particular that need that desperately. It might surprise you to know that in social studies, we haven't done an adoption since 1990. And so that's what our textbooks and our materials and our maps and our globes actually reflect in many of our schools, not in all, but in many. And the world has changed a great deal since then. So the second thing we want to do is put high quality materials in teachers' hands. And when you see, for example, the social studies adoptions, what you'll see are certainly some text for supporting American history or global studies, but you'll also see updated maps and globes and art and other things that might go along with that, as well as projectors and screens and audio-visual stuff that matches those materials. And yes, it is true, just to continue to use social studies as a great example, it is true that a teacher can substitute a chapter out of something else that they like better, that they can substitute materials for a piece of a base text. So teachers can continue to use lots of supplemental. So quality materials is the second thing. The third thing is we want to make sure that all of our teachers have in their hands the highest leverage instructional practices. Many of them do, but some of them have not been given the professional development, the training and support, and oftentimes our teachers have not been brought together across the district and allowed to share great practice. And we want to reinstitute the opportunities for our teachers to come in the room together, to share their practice, and to make sure that within their discipline or within their work, they know what those practices are and they are coaching and supporting each other. And then the fourth thing we want to do in this curriculum framework is have enough assignments and assessments in common that we know we're getting equitable outcomes. Right now, what a student experiences in one school is often very different in the same type of classroom in another school. And while we don't want it to be cookie cutter or lockstep or to lock down teachers' creativity and innovation, we want that to flourish. We do want to hold enough in common that we can be sure that whether you're in middle level at Jackson or middle level in a K-8 at Vernon or at middle level at George or at high school at Cleveland or Franklin or Roosevelt, that you can be assured that your student, your child, is getting toward the outcomes and benchmarks that we expect as a district. And the important reasons for this are ones that I've cited. the fact that there's uneven, terribly uneven expectations and outcomes across the district, even while we have some amazing pockets of excellence, schools that I will put up against any in the country. We want to make sure there's fewer gaps in our curriculum and less repetition. Right now, we do novel studies at middle and high school, and those are amazing, but sometimes a ninth grader gets the same novel that was already taught in 7th grade somewhere. We want to make sure that we keep robust novel studies, but we narrow the duplication and the repetition. We have a huge amount of mobility. As many as 20% of our students changes school, and we want them not necessarily, again, to walk in on the same page or in the same stuff, but to somewhere approximate what they were learning in another school. And we want to far more effectively support our teachers through great training and great materials, and most importantly, the opportunity to share practice across schools so that those pockets of excellence don't just exist in part of the city, but they exist everywhere in the city.
Thank you, Vicki. In 1990, the world was round. In 2007, the world is flat, so it will take a lot of work. Thank you again for really, honestly, a very thorough answer. Number 3, what is the rationale behind focusing on K through 8 schools rather than elementary and middle? What outcomes do you expect to see by creating more K-8 schools?
So I think, first of all, we're trying to focus on all schools, but to allow a variety of configurations to flourish. One of the things that I know about Portland is that we value variety and differences, and that we can hold an array of schools as part of our system. For example, we already have a K-12 school that's been in place for a long time. We already had 2 strong K-8 schools that are already in place and have been for a long time. So Portland has allowed a variety of configurations. And that's what we want to continue to do. In areas where middle schools were strong, we wanted to leave good, healthy, strong middle schools intact. In areas where middle schools were lower performing, and in which we had elementary schools that were doing amazing jobs of educating all students, the full diverse population, even in areas with higher poverty and more diversity, we're actually closing the achievement gap and moving student performance to high levels. We wanted to build on that opportunity. And K-8 schools afford an opportunity to do that. There's no magic bullet configuration out there, but there are pockets and places where we could see a new configuration having some advantages. So for example, K-8 schools, the research is pretty clear that they keep student achievement as high or higher than some successful middle schools. So you don't lose in terms of student achievement. But they also have advantages like fewer transitions for students. And we know that one of the dips in performance that students experience, particularly kids that are already behind, is when they actually make a transition. In fact, you will see us pay a great deal of attention to our transition of kids from 8th to 9th grade now, because that transition is a very tough one, no matter what kind of school that you have come out of. We also know that when parents get involved early on and they're in a school for more years, they're likely to stay involved, because often parent involvement does diminish when kids move to middle schools, particularly middle schools where parent involvement has been less likely in the past. And we also know that kids show incredible leadership tendencies sometimes and feel less anonymous and more self-confident, and in some ways, and in some areas even safer in schools where they are there for a longer period of time and are well known all the way through. So we're trying to let a whole array of schools flourish. We think we have some great middle schools that serve 6, 7, and 8, and we want to keep those. We think there's room for K-8s, and that we will have some amazing K-8s across the city. We have a K-12 school, and you may know that next year we will actually have 2 6-12 schools, because we will be opening a leadership academy for young men and a leadership academy for young women that will serve grades 6 to 12. So what we're trying to do is match the configurations more closely to the needs and the interest of particular communities.
Thank you, Vicki. Susan, how are we doing on time? I want to leave plenty of time. You okay? All right. What is the strategy of Portland Public Schools for dealing with our aging physical plant and declining student population? And what is the implication for neighborhood schools?
So we've had sort of two strategies. The first is to use the strongest buildings that we have and to use those to capacity. And that has meant, given our declining enrollment and given the fact that we had a lot of capacity and buildings reaching critical states, that we've had to do some things like close schools, build more capacity in some buildings. Although I want to be clear that that has also been about making sure that we can offer a more robust curriculum and stronger integrated services as well. So it's not just about closing buildings and moving to schools of a size that allow us to do that. But it is about also using our strongest facilities and then making an investment in those. And many of you know that we've had only about $3 million to spend on the full array of facilities every year for the last 5 or 6 years since our capital bond expired. So making that investment as wise and strategically as we can make it is incredibly important. And so all of that is one strategy, using our best buildings, investing in them as wisely as we can. The second strategy, though, is to, as we look forward over the next few years to going back out for a capital bond, to think very differently about what we want that bond to look like and how we might partner within this community to think about some creative and innovative space that might be conducive to learning that we haven't necessarily had conversations about and talked about. So over the next few months, you will see many opportunities to come together with us and to help us think through how a city as creative and resourceful in its thinking as Portland can begin to help us think differently about our facilities needs and our facilities work. And in the meantime, we're trying to showcase and illustrate what a whole array of partnerships might look like. Most of you know the incredible partnership that brought about Rosa Parks and the new Rosa Parks building. You may be aware that there's a long-term and a short-term committee working to look at the issues around Lincoln and its overcrowding and the fact that the West Side is growing in enrollment. You may or may not be aware that there's a community group beginning to think about sort of the Fernwood area and what kind of partnerships might exist there. So we're trying to really look at an array of possibilities about how we might partner, and we're going to be re-examining every single one of our buildings to see what it will take in the future to make those buildings reflect the kind of spaces and places that we want our kids to be in, and we will keep coming back to the community with that information, particularly over, I would say, the next year or 18 months. And we will make sure that we're pretty clear about where we want to go before we come back and ask you to invest again in a capital bond.
Thank you, Vicki. How, in your mind, can we improve the public engagement process when it comes to discussing school improvement in Portland? And what specifically can the community do to help you and Portland Public Schools achieve the goals that have been set out?
So I think there's a variety of things. I mean, one of the things that we will say we're just not good at yet. Actually, there are 3 things I would say we are just not good at yet. One is sometimes communicating on the front end where our intent is, what the process is, and the flexibilities that may be in it, and the kind of response we're going to have to feedback. So one of the important things is to stay in the conversation with us when we have a process going, because typically we haven't really decided and won't until we've heard everything out. And that's the case with the curriculum conversations, where there's still 2 or 3 months of work to be done before we make any kind of decisions, and already we can see where we would shift certain things. So communication up front about things is not as strong as we would like, and we want to figure out how to communicate more strongly our processes. The second is literally working hard to find a healthy balance in Portland between sort of the urgency of the outcomes that we all feel and want to get and the kind of process we want to work on. And how to take advantage of, again, as I've said 3 or 4 times in here, what I think of as just the most incredible and resourceful city in the country, and certainly than I've ever been in. And so how do we help the community get far more involved on the design side of things? And I will give an example of the K-8s. One of the things we want to do with our K-8 schools is we've had a committee working to just kind of say, what does the district want clearly to see reflected in those schools? A rigorous, very rich curriculum. Youth development opportunities for our youngsters that are in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade so that they see themselves as really confident leaders moving into high school and they leave successfully. Good planning time and supports for our teachers. There's an array of things. Strong partnerships within the community with parents and businesses and others. But all of those leave great room for what that might look like at Astor versus Vernon versus Creston versus Arleta, both of which I were in yesterday. So we want to get better at saying, here's sort of the base things that we're looking for as a district. Now as staff and community, the design work is really yours in terms of building the kind of unique school and taking advantage of the community resources that sit there. And I think we're trying to get better at us being clear about what it is we're looking for and really engaging people in the design work then and in the problem solving, not just having to reaction. And we will say we're getting better at that, but not as good as we would like. And so keep pushing on us, keep coming back at us when something works and when it doesn't. And then the third piece is partnerships. I mean, one of the things that is astonishing is the number of people that will approach me on a weekly basis wanting to do something tangibly to help their own school or the district. And quite frankly, I've struggled with that, not because we don't want it, but because as a district, we haven't been very well positioned to take advantage of those partnerships. We haven't either had the capacity because you know that as the budget cuts came in the district, a lot of Central was decimated. Some of that was needed and necessary to have us be more efficient and effective. But for example, it wiped out our whole curriculum and teaching and learning department. It wiped out our area that helped with those partnerships and helps us make those connections. So we're trying to both rebuild our capacity and learn how to be a really great partner again. And I think part of what we ask is your patience, your understanding, keep coming back at us when things don't feel good and telling us why so that we can make the necessary adjustments. Understand that we're all after the same good intentions, and please don't give up. If you've got a tangible way of helping us, keep coming back at us because we are figuring those things out, and I think we're going to get stronger and stronger at them every single year. And despite what people might say, we don't mind constructive critique at all, and we're capable of adjusting our perspective as a result.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks so much. I'm going to ask one more question, and given the time, this could be the 3-minute question that you might be looking for. No, I mean, it could be, give you an opportunity because it's kind of a general one. In thinking about the future, what are the major outcomes you hope to achieve in the next year and the next 5 years? What is it that you would like to aspire to for the district?
Well, over the next 2 or 3 years, I think we've been clear that we want to continue to maintain both the financial stability and build it up so that we can rebuild some important services in Portland. We still have far too many schools that can't offer the full array of enrichment to kids and still really support struggling kids in math and English language arts and other areas. We still have far too many schools that don't have access to the counseling, librarians, and other support that they need. We still have far too many kids struggling that aren't getting the extra time and attention. We still have far too many of our teachers that don't have access to each other, to ongoing professional development. So all those things you're going to see us keep building on, and certainly the high school transformation, the K-8s, the curriculum work will continue over a period of years. But my long-term aspiration for Portland is really simple. I want to be able to say tangibly, with evidence to back it up, that Portland is among the premier districts in this country. Not just the premier urban districts, but the premier districts in the country. And that it has taken all of Portland to make that happen, not just the school system, but the way the city reacts, the kind of connectedness of partnerships and services that we have all together made that happen for every single kid, every single school in this city. And while we can make some claim to that, we can't say that that happens in every single pocket of this city, for every kid, for every school, for every community. And only when we can tangibly point to that can we really lay claim to the fact that we are the best. So we are good, but we are not good enough yet, and we want to head to being great and literally being the city where the city works, public education works, everything points to the kind of livability, sustainability that draws children and families here and people to work here, and just continues to make Portland the most creative and innovative place in the country.
Well, thank you, Vicki.
It's your turn now. We will have questions and answers from that microphone over there. City Club members, you know the drill. Please keep your questions brief so that we have time to hear from a number of people. First question will be asked by our board host, Brian Campbell. He's first vice president of the Board of Governors of City Club, and he is chair of the City Club Research Board, which is an enormous job, I'll tell you. Brian has recently retired from the Port of Portland, where he was planning manager for 15 years. Brian.
Thank you, Susan. Well, after your last answer, my question is a little bit out of sequence here, but anyway, I'll ask it because it's tied to and based on the education finance study that we have just completed. And it's a little unfair to ask you that, I realize, because you haven't read it, but nevertheless, we need to a little exposure for that study, so I thought I'd tie it into this question. One of the first things that we learned about K through 12 funding in Oregon is that as a result of Measure 5, it's almost completely controlled by the state. Essentially, there's a ceiling on what local districts can provide for their students, since they have very limited ability to raise money in excess of the state distribution formula. There is a local option tax, we just passed one, but even that's constrained by Measure 5 limits. One of our recommendations in the study is to change state law to allow school districts to provide additional local funding, but only when state funding is shown to be inadequate to provide the resources that would enable students to meet state performance standards. This would include exceeding Measure 5 limits or using any other taxing method that's legal. If such a change were made, how might you and the school board take advantage of this type of unconstrained local fundraising tool to help stabilize funding and provide the opportunity for all of your students to meet their performance goals?
Wow. So I think the board now will be very interested in seeing that study. And, you know, I continue to believe that the base premise that drove Oregon originally to equalize funding across school districts and students is an important one in terms of all kids in Oregon getting access to what they need in terms of performance standards. And, but I think that equity without adequacy is a huge problem, and when you do one without the other, you get the kind of issues and problems that Portland and other districts are experiencing. So certainly an important caveat for me personally and professionally in that would be that if we were raising more local money, there would actually be two caveats. One would be whether the community as a whole can support that in a way that doesn't so stretch us to the limits that we're competing against other really important and needed services, and where families are feeling it so heavily that it drives them out of the city instead of in it. And then the second caveat for us would be that making sure that it's where state funding is inadequate to meet performance standards. So we're not just asking for more money's sake from our community or from the state, because I'm somebody who actually believes in accountability, as you know, and that we need to be paying attention to those things. But we are so open to creative solutions and to having more flexibility at the local level because of the issues that we've been facing. And it would be my hope that a report like this might spur a larger conversation across the state about what's needed, because I can't imagine that lots of other local districts besides the ones in Portland aren't facing this.
Mike Rosen, City Club member. Hi, Vicki. Given the upcoming school board elections, I'd appreciate it if you could give us your perspective on the different roles and responsibilities of your position as superintendent and school board members, and then also if you could give us some feedback on what you'd like to see the school board do more of and less of.
Whoa, now that's a loaded question. You know, actually, it's not a loaded question with the kind of board members that Portland has produced over the last few years. I think, you know, the difference in role between my role and the board is that my job is to operate the district on an ongoing basis, to provide the leadership and the management for it. The board's job is to set the policy framework that enables me to do that in a way that is in the best interest of all of the school children in Portland. And, you know, in that vein, the board has a lot of really important issues coming up. The high school work that we're about to do, the enrollment and transfer policy that they're reviewing now. There are a number of really important policy decisions that will make a difference. And, you know, my own view about school boards over the years, and this isn't particular to Portland's, but it is particular to my point of view about their effectiveness or ineffectiveness, is also about the roles that people play, because you really do need both people that have good financial backgrounds and heads on their shoulders. You need people that have a parent community perspective that really allows you to look more broadly. You need people that, you know, understand the kind of processes and the sort of outcome work that needs to be done. So you really have to, in some ways, look at the board as a whole and say, are we getting a variety of roles? And two, board members really have to come at this with a perspective about all kids and have to sometimes set aside their personal interests in order to be able to serve effectively, and certainly have to build a relationship with all kinds of stakeholders, not the least are those inside the district and with me and my team as well as externally. And, you know, it is, I think my job, my type of job is one of the toughest, but so is anybody who volunteers in the kind of public way that board members do around such important issues. So we would want people that come at it with strong passion and an ability to look at the district as a system and an ability to look from a strong policy framework that really, again, reflects the best interest of this community.
Fred Mathis, and I'm a retired academic pediatrician and family doctor. I lived overseas for a while where children started school at age 7. And when young people were seen to act up in public, people remarked that they missed the first 7 years. Moreover, the criminal justice system is responsible for an awful lot of things that have to do with mental health. My question is, do you think the school system is being asked to provide some of the first 7 years for these kids instead of just straight academic work?
Well, I think certainly school systems are being asked to you know, to do a lot more than they've been asked to do in the past, but they're also being asked to do that in partnership with lots of other organizations and agencies. And I think, you know, one of the things we know, and one of the things I'm a huge advocate of, and people can help put their voice behind in this legislative session, is that Oregon is one of only 5 states that doesn't invest heavily in high-quality preschool opportunities for kids in full-day kindergarten and lowering class size in those early years where kids can get some of the time and attention they need. And I don't think this is parents' fault or community's fault or school's fault. I think we all have to band together and have a responsibility here. And I don't, you know, I want to offer more preschool opportunities for kids at ages 3 and 4. That doesn't mean I don't think their parents shouldn't have a really strong role. In fact, some of that might be through parent training to enable them to be able to do that in collaboration with the district. And I do think, and have a bias, that if we invest in our young kids early on, from the time they're born as a community, not just as a district, but as a community, from the time they're born up through, making sure that they have good prenatal care, that they have good health care all the way through those years, that they get some of the developmental supports they need, both through their parents and through other opportunities, that we change that criminal justice thing, because kids who actually have access to high quality early childhood experiences are less likely to be involved in more intensive interventions like special education and other kinds of remediation. They're less likely to drop out of school. They're less likely to get involved in the criminal justice system. I just ask myself constantly why Oregon doesn't make those investments, and we need to do something about that.
You just gave your sermon to the choir. Thank you.
Glad to be in sync.
Hi, Barb Wolf, City Club member. I'm very impressed listening to you today, how thoroughly you've looked at the academics and the overall look of the schools and everything. However, there's another side to education I'd like to ask you about. The Rose Festival's coming up again, and one of the things that makes me sad now is that there is no Portland school bands. It's a ragtag combination in different uniforms because no school has their own. Is there any look at that currently?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me very sad too when I was watching the parade last year. And, you know, some of it has to do with the fact that to pull together a really robust opportunity, there's a funding issue. There's also a how do we give enough lead time to pull kids across a variety of schools and things. And a lot of it really goes back to the fact that we have, since Measure 5, really allowed, because of the budget cuts, such decision-making at the school level, and because of the budget cuts, that we have really seen programs like art, music, and wellness decimated. And sometimes because there was no other choice, not, again, a blame game on schools and stuff. But I think it's time for Portland to rebuild in those areas, and we're going to definitely need to do it more slowly and gradually than we would like because of resources, but we are asking schools this year to begin to take steps toward that. And so until we start to really rebuild our music program, we can do some things to help on things like the Rose Festival, but we won't really be able to say we have got, you know, you can choose from 10 bands across the city and they're each as strong as the other, and you have to have a feeder pattern of kids coming up through the system having had great music opportunities to really be able to do that. And we have some amazing music and art teachers and partners working all across the city to help us get back to the place we need to be. And unfortunately, we're just not there yet.
Thank you.
Nicole Breedlove, City Club member. My background is in urban planning and policy, and I'm currently doing research for a national nonprofit organization about No Child Left Behind regulations. And I'm concerned that the school district has taken away the choice of a high school program with a comprehensive curriculum in our low-income neighborhoods. The new small high school structure at Roosevelt, Marshall, Jefferson, and Madison requires that children decide as incoming ninth graders what subject they will focus on for the next 4 years. It limits curriculum choices when many high school students need to be exposed to various subjects before choosing a focused area of study for university, and transfer spaces at the comprehensive high schools are limited for those students. Small schools are susceptible to closure. For example, 1 year after Marshall High School divided into 4 small academies, one had to be closed due to budget cuts. The programs also have high administrative costs, money that could be spent on teaching or other supports for students that are behind grade level. The reforms don't address documented reasons why high schools in low-income neighborhoods aren't showing the same results that high schools in higher-income neighborhoods are showing. Research about whether small high school reform improves student learning is inconclusive at best. And finally, there are other ways to provide small, personalized learning environments that are less costly and provide greater educational opportunities to our students. So I'm wondering, what is the district doing specifically to address these disadvantages of small high school reforms at Roosevelt, Marshall, Jefferson, and Madison? And will these reforms be implemented in all of our high schools or just limited to the low-income neighborhoods?
So I think we would respectfully disagree about the advantages or disadvantages of small schools and what they can bring over time to the district and to an array of students. I think where we would agree, and something I feel strongly about, is that in moving to some of those options for students, not just our small schools, but in our other options, and I would say this is true even in our comprehensives, Portland doesn't have yet the kind of staffing and support system in those schools, again, due to budget cuts and lots of other things, and maybe decisions where we didn't put the right parameters around them initially, that enables those schools to really flourish. A small high school, particularly if we grow them to 400 or so each of those small schools, which is an expectation, we can actually offer not only the full graduation requirements, but some pretty creative and opportunities and enrichments and pathways for kids into post-secondary and upwardly mobile opportunities. And those models do exist across the country, and some exist in Portland, and we can continue to make them exist. But it is going to require some investments. This year we're going to really relook at staffing all across our high schools, because we would submit that we don't have the right staffing pattern for our comprehensives or our small schools yet, or some of our alternative programs. And in the case where Portland needs to rebuild, that's one of the areas that we need to get to. And what we shouldn't do in the meantime is throw out what can be a really effective model. We should work to make it do what we need it to for kids.
Sharon Van Sickle-Robbins, City Club member. Bill Gates recently said that the #1 priority for education in our country is 100% graduation rates for high schoolers. And I'm just wondering how far away from that we are in Portland Public Schools, whether we can get there, how soon we can get there, and kind of what the biggest strategies are to get us there.
Well, our graduation rate and conversely our dropout rate has really improved since about 1995, I think. The district has been systematically working for a long time, so even before I came. But it is true that we have to really step up the work across our high schools, and in particular that making the amount of progress that we're making right now against benchmarks is good, but too slow and incremental to really meet the graduation requirements and what's expected, particularly of students that want to go to a 2-year or 4-year college or into a really strong and robust even apprenticeship program. I mean, the studies that are out are really clear that what it takes to work in today's jobs and the jobs that are coming and earn a livable wage, that it takes the same thing for those jobs as it does to college. So we have to make sure that kids graduate with that set of skills, even as we have very different kinds of schools and choices going on. And we are really pushing on, thinking more creatively about this, but holding the rigor in some ways of the curriculum and the requirements strong so that kids can indeed matriculate into all of those opportunities. And I think that the fact that 60% of our kids now graduate not being able to meet the Oregon State University requirements is a problem. It is a problem that not enough of our kids who do graduate and go to a college stay in to finish even 5 or 6 years later. But we also have, as I said earlier, an amazing opportunity. Our community-based alternative schools and our district inside alternatives have helped us bring 500 or so kids back into the district every year, and I think the last study was a couple of years ago. And so they're really adding back and helping kids get those opportunities. So it's going to take all of us to change that dynamic, and I think it's one of the things we're very excited about, actually, in the next few years.
Phil Richmond, City Club member. Peter mentioned in 1990 the world was round, and now in 2007 it's flat. My daughter attends a private kindergarten language immersion program as a result of it not being available 2 blocks away at a much lesser price. I'm wondering where on the priority list language immersion plays and creating more pervasiveness across all the communities in Portland.
So, as you know, we are working as hard as we can to expand our language programs. We added 2 additional Spanish immersions last year. We have Japanese immersion. We have a pre-K through 12 Mandarin immersion program. And this fall, we're actually starting a Russian immersion program. So we're working very hard to expand those opportunities and to think as we head toward our 2011 graduation requirements, to think about the role world language is going to play all the way up the district over the next 5 to 10 years, because there's no doubt that as things go more global and as we grapple with some of the issues our kids have to face, both not just in the communities they're going to live in, but the work they're going to do, the way they need to be learning, that we have to step up that. It is immersion, world language, the whole array is a really important goal for Portland. Like many of the things we're doing, it's constrained because of our resource base, and so we're having to be pretty strategic about how we rebuild to get there, but certainly a goal that we have to realize if we can lay claim to making sure that all of our kids graduate, and they all graduate with what it takes to live and work and learn, continue to learn in the 21st century.
Corey Allen, City Club member. Last week there was a story in the Oregonian about inequities when a focus option or magnet school goes into a neighborhood school. And our daughter has had a phenomenal education in the focus option school, the Odyssey program that was highlighted. And it's a K through 8, and she's done very well. It's been a perfect place for her. But I wonder if there's a structural problem within Portland public schools, either the infrastructure, administration, or culturally, that keeps these neighborhood schools and these magnet schools at odds rather than flourishing.
So I think that's a fair question, and certainly if you looked at some of our history, you would say that there's been tensions among, and I think our goal is that, you know, I personally believe that parents' first very best choice ought to be a great school near where they live, in their neighborhood, and then there should be an array of options on top of that that really tap kids' interest and other kinds of needs. Because I think what happens right now is our kids walk away from something as opposed to walking to something, our students and families. So we want to try to level that playing field. And we've done some of that in terms of making a more transparent and equitable staffing formula. But, you know, we're just not staffed well in the district across the board yet in terms of our schools. So we still have all those issues. And we haven't known very well, I think, how to put two schools in a building and have both of them flourish very well, and we are grappling with and looking at all of those issues. And our commitment, I think, is to a more strategic set of decisions that allow us not to have the tension, but to have both be really viable and strong, and you know, both have the level of resources they need, but not one at the expense of the other.
Hi, I'm Lisa Kaskin, City Club member. Our two children have benefited both from programs at Winter Haven and also IB at Cleveland. It's been great. In reference to the proposed new curriculum framework, many of these teachers have already developed successful programs, and many of them are not interested, or so I understand, in the new curriculum. So is there some reason that we are going to provide it to everyone, or can we save taxpayers' dollars and use that for something else and just provide the curriculum to those schools and teachers who want it and need it?
So actually, remember, what we're doing is providing a curriculum framework, not a steadfast, explicit curriculum. So let me use an example. I'll go back to social studies. The social studies teachers in this district have done an amazing job over the years of working against state standards, actually increasing those standards where they thought were appropriate in Portland, and creating some tools and some shared opportunities for teachers. What they will acknowledge, though, is that that hasn't been used all the way across the district. And as a result, we have some very uneven outcomes for kids. As much as we may think we've done an amazing history of work, and we have done an amazing history of work, but now the job is to make sure it happens all across. So the social studies teachers have been working with us at the high school over the last few weeks, and they've actually put forward a proposal around both the kinds of materials and support they want, the opportunities they want for professional development, having the teachers drive the common assignments and assessments work, again, making sure that they're externally calibrated so that we can ensure we've got good outcomes. And they've learned in conversations with us that there's some flexibility in there. And that's why I'm saying people should stay in the process, because there are lots of teachers out there who understand that we're driving toward a framework, who want to be part of developing that, and who also want new materials because they don't like those 1990 so far out of date things. And where there needs to be flexibility for schools who may already be at a very high level of performance, we are totally having those discussions. And we are, again, several months away from any final decisions around materials and what goes where, because we have a set of committees working and we want to continue to not only honor that work, but honor the rest of the 2 or 3 months of community process that will end up in my recommendations to the board and the work that the ELA and social studies and other teachers are doing right now.
I'm sorry to say that we're out of time. On behalf of the City Club of Portland, I would like to thank all of you for your participation here today, both members and guests. I'd like to thank our radio and television audience for their interest in City Club and ask you to join me in giving a big thanks to Vicki Phillips and Peter Cookson for a very interesting presentation. We are adjourned.